New information tonight at 5. The Arkansas woman accused of shooting a Memphis pastor to death was back in court this morning. Latasha Daniels is charged with shooting and killing Brodus Perry, the executive pastor at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, and injuring his wife in their Collierville apartment last April. Daniels pleaded not guilty and will remain in jail until her next court appearance in mid-November.
Daniels is accused of killing Memphis area pastor Brodus Perry and injuring his wife late last week.
We are taking it slowly. We are taking this professionally, and we're going to do what needs to be done.
This is the story of a love triangle that spiraled out of control, leading to betrayal, heartbreak, and a shocking act of violence. It's a tale that forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about love, trust, and the darker sides of human emotion. How far would someone go when they feel betrayed by the one they trusted the most? Can someone's public image of faith and integrity truly mask a web of secrets? And at what point does love, intense, consuming love, turn into something dangerous? Today, we will tell the story of Pastor Brodus Perry's life and tragic death. His community admired him for his unwavering faith and dedication. On the surface, he was a man of God, a loving husband, and a spiritual leader. But hidden behind the pulpit was a story of forbidden passion, fractured promises, and lives teetering on the edge of despair. Pastor Perry wasn't just a pastor. He was a third-generation spiritual guide, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather. He stood at the helm of Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in Memphis, Tennessee, a role that symbolized hope and guidance for his congregation. People admired him for his wisdom, compassion, and sense of purpose. He had this magnetic aura, the kind of presence that made people believe that if they just listened to him, their lives would be better. But isn't it ironic? The same man who many looked up to as a symbol of stability and moral righteousness was living a life far removed from the values he preached. This was a man who carried secrets so heavy they would eventually bring his world crashing down. To understand this story, we have to go back to a time before his life became a headline, back to his humble beginnings. Brodus Perry grew up in a household where faith was more than just a Sunday morning ritual. It was a way of life. His family's legacy was rooted in guiding others spiritually, and Brodus took this responsibility seriously. He attended Florida A&M University, where he studied business administration, a surprising choice for someone destined to walk the path of faith. But even then, his heart yearned for more than spreadsheets and profit margins. He wanted to touch lives, not just with words, but with purpose. When he married Tabitha, friends and family believed it was a match made in heaven. She was kind, intelligent, and supportive, a perfect complement to his role as a spiritual leader. Together, they dreamed of a fresh start, moving to Memphis to build their life in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. To the outside world, they were the epitome of a strong, loving couple, united by their faith and shared goals. But as we've learned from countless stories, appearances can be deceiving. Enter Latasha Daniels. At first glance, she was everything you'd expect of a successful, accomplished woman. She was a clinical social worker, an anger management specialist, and someone who seemed to have her life together. But beneath the polished exterior was a woman who would eventually be consumed by her emotions. Emotions so intense they would drive her to commit an unthinkable act. Latasha met Brodus during their time working at a nonprofit organization in Arkansas. What started as a professional relationship soon crossed boundaries neither of them should have ignored. They became involved in a secret affair, one fueled by passion, connection, and perhaps a shared sense of escape from their respective realities. For Latasha, this relationship was more than just a fling. It was love, consuming, and all-encompassing. And when Brodus decided to end it, she was left devastated, betrayed, and utterly broken. But here's the thing about love. It's never simple. It's messy and unpredictable, and when it's one-sided, it can turn dangerous. For Brodus, the affair was something he wanted to leave in the past, a mistake he hoped to bury as he focused on rebuilding his life with Tabitha. For Latasha, it wasn't just an affair. It was a promise she believed he made to her, to leave his wife and start anew. When that promise was broken, so was she. On the fateful night of April 4th, 2019, Latoshia drove over 130 miles from Little Rock, Arkansas to Collierville, Tennessee. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was deliberate, calculated, and fueled by emotions that had been simmering for far too long. When she arrived at Broads and Tabitha's apartment, she wasn't just carrying a gun. She was carrying the weight of months of heartbreak, frustration, and rage. That night, the lives of everyone involved would change forever. A community would be left mourning. A wife would be left grappling with unimaginable grief and betrayal. And a woman who once seemed to have everything would find herself behind bars, her career and life in ruins. But what drives someone to take such drastic actions? Is it love, anger, desperation? Or is it a combination of all these things layered with years of suppressed emotions and unfulfilled promises? These are the questions we'll explore as we unravel the events of that tragic night and the shocking revelations that followed. Stay with me as we journey deeper into this haunting story of love, betrayal, and a moment of violence that shattered lives forever. You're watching True Crime Stories 24/7. Thanks for joining. Please do well to subscribe and like this video to support us. April 4th, 2019. The day began like any other for Pastor Broads Perry and his wife Tabitha. They had settled into their quiet life in Collierville, Tennessee, embracing the fresh start they had sought when they moved from Arkansas. For Tabitha, it was a normal evening. She busied herself with household tasks, perhaps thinking about their shared plans for the weekend or her husband's work at the church. Nothing about that evening suggested it would end in unimaginable tragedy, but while Tabitha went about her routine over 130 miles away, Latoshia Daniels was making a decision that would alter the course of their lives forever. She left her home in Little Rock, Arkansas, with a gun tucked into her belongings and her mind set on confronting Broads. This was no spur-of-the-moment act. It was premeditated. Her emotions had been brewing for weeks: anger, heartbreak, and a sense of betrayal she couldn't contain. Every mile of that drive was fueled by her unresolved feelings and the belief that Broads had wronged her in the worst way. When she arrived at the Perry home that evening, it was around 10 p.m. Tabitha, unaware of the storm brewing, heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see Latoshia standing there. To Tabitha, Latoshia was just an acquaintance from Arkansas, someone she and her husband had crossed paths with in their previous community. Trusting that familiarity, Tabitha let her in. They sat together, exchanging small talk. Tabitha might have felt a slight unease. Something in Latoshia's demeanor seemed off. Perhaps it was the way she avoided eye contact or how her responses felt clipped. But nothing prepared her for what was about to happen. Shortly after, Broads arrived home. He walked through the door, greeted his wife and Latoshia, and settled into the living room with them. The three of them sat together, and a casual conversation began. At first glance, it might have seemed like any ordinary interaction. But underneath the surface, tension was building. Tabitha noticed it. The way Latoshia's energy seemed heavy, the strange pauses in her speech, the slight tremor in her voice. It was as though something was bubbling just beneath the surface, waiting to explode. The conversation continued, but Latoshia's behavior became increasingly erratic. Tabitha couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something felt wrong. Then, in a moment that would haunt her forever, Latoshia stood up abruptly. She signaled that it was time for her to leave. Broads and Tabitha, ever polite, rose to escort her to the door. It was a gesture of courtesy, a normal way to see off a guest. But before they could reach the door, everything changed. In one swift motion, Latoshia turned around, pulled out a gun, and aimed it directly at Broads. Her hands were trembling, but her grip was firm enough to convey that she had been planning this moment. Time seemed to freeze as Tabitha processed the horrifying scene in front of her. Latoshia's voice cracked as she screamed, "You broke my heart!" over and over, her words slicing through the air like knives. Without hesitation, Latoshia began firing. The first shot rang out, hitting Broads and sending him crashing to the floor. Tabitha screamed, the sound raw and filled with terror. The room erupted into chaos as more shots followed, each one a devastating punctuation to Latoshia's cries of betrayal. "You broke my heart," she repeated, her voice growing louder with each pull of the trigger. Broads lay on the floor, blood pooling around him. Tabitha dropped to her knees beside him, desperate to help, but she couldn't stop the horror unfolding before her eyes. Letocia, in a frenzy, continued her attack. The gun clicked as it emptied, and for a brief moment, there was silence. A silence filled with the weight of what had just happened. But it wasn't over. Letocia fumbled with the gun, reloading it as Tabitha tried to shield her husband's body. At that moment, Tabitha's survival instincts kicked in. She needed to get help. She needed to escape. With tears streaming down her face, she bolted out of the apartment, banging on a neighbor's door and screaming for help. Letocia didn't flee. She stood there, seemingly frozen, staring at what she had done. It was as if she couldn't process the magnitude of her actions. But then, something snapped. She walked out of the apartment and into the night, only to return moments later. Tabitha, still outside pleading for help, saw her re-enter the apartment. She could only imagine the horror Letocia was about to unleash. Inside, Letocia found Tabitha again. This time, she aimed the gun at her. A single shot rang out, hitting Tabitha in the shoulder. The pain was searing, but it wasn't enough to stop her. Tabitha managed to escape once more, stumbling outside just as the sound of sirens filled the air. The police had arrived. When officers entered the scene, they found Letocia still there, holding the gun. They ordered her to drop the weapon, but she refused. Even as they closed in, she resisted, forcing them to use non-lethal force to restrain her. The once composed anger management specialist was now thrashing, screaming, and struggling against the officers who took her into custody. But even then, the chaos didn't end. At the hospital, where she was taken for minor injuries, Letocia attempted to escape. She sprinted through the hallways, dodging officers, and fought them off when they finally caught her. Her resistance only added to the list of charges she would face: first-degree murder, attempted murder, assault on police officers, and resisting arrest. As Tabitha was treated for her injuries, the devastating reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Her husband was gone, taken from her in the most violent, unimaginable way. And the woman responsible was someone she had once trusted, someone who had been let into her home without a second thought. The events of that night would leave a permanent scar, not just on Tabitha, but on an entire community that had looked to Broads Perry as a beacon of faith and guidance. The pastor who had once inspired so many had been brought down by the very human flaws he tried to counsel others against. And as the investigation unfolded, the world would learn the full, tragic extent of the secrets and lies that had led to his untimely death. As news of the shooting spread, it sent shockwaves through the Memphis community and beyond. Pastor Broads Perry wasn't just a husband and spiritual leader. He was a symbol of faith and compassion, a man many turned to for guidance and support. His congregation at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church was devastated. How could this happen to someone they admired so deeply? How could a man who dedicated his life to God and his community meet such a violent, senseless end? But as investigators began piecing together the events that led to the shooting, a darker, more complicated picture of Pastor Perry's life began to emerge. The investigation uncovered a secret that would leave the community reeling. Pastor Perry, the man of faith and the devoted husband, had been leading a double life. His affair with Letocia Daniels wasn't just a fleeting indiscretion. It was an intense, emotionally charged relationship that had been brewing for months. Letocia wasn't merely a scorned lover. She was a woman who had invested her heart, her emotions, and her future into a relationship that she believed was destined to become something more. For Letocia, Broads wasn't just a forbidden love. He was a promise unfulfilled. According to her, he had assured her that he would leave his wife Tabitha to start a new life with her. But when Broads ended the relationship and chose to stay with his wife, Letocia felt betrayed in the deepest, most personal way. To make matters worse, the investigation revealed another shocking detail. Letocia had become pregnant during the affair. However, she claimed that Broads had convinced her to have an abortion, a decision that reportedly left her emotionally devastated. These revelations painted a picture of a woman who had been pushed to the brink, her heartbreak and frustration boiling over into rage. For the congregation at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, these revelations were almost too much to bear. They had seen Pastor Perry as a man of integrity, a spiritual guide whose life was a reflection of the values he preached. To learn that he had been involved in an affair, and that this affair had led to his death, was a crushing blow. Rumors and whispers spread like wildfire, threatening to overshadow the legacy of the man they once revered. But what about Tabitha, the woman who had stood by Broads, who had shared his dreams, and who had believed in their marriage? For her, the revelations were a double-edged sword. She was already grieving the violent loss of her husband, a loss that had left a gaping void in her life. But now, she also had to grapple with the betrayal she had discovered too late. Broads hadn't just left her to face the tragedy of his death. He had left her to navigate the aftermath of his secrets, secrets that had shattered the foundation of their life together. You're watching True Crime Stories 24/7. Thanks for joining. Please do well to subscribe and like this video to support us. The legal proceedings against Latoshia Daniels began with intense public scrutiny. She faced a litany of charges, including first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, assault on a police officer, and resisting arrest. Her first court appearance drew significant attention, with reporters and community members packing the courtroom to catch a glimpse of the woman at the center of this tragic case. Latoshia's defense team argued that her actions were the result of extreme emotional distress, a temporary break from reality caused by the betrayal she had suffered. But for the Perry family and the Memphis community, her motives couldn't justify her actions. She had taken a life, shattered a family, and left an entire congregation in mourning. The courtroom proceedings were marked by moments of high emotion. Latoshia, often wiping tears from her eyes, seemed to oscillate between remorse and defiance. Tabitha, though physically healed from her injuries, sat silently, her presence a stark reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. For the Perry family, the trial wasn't just about seeking justice. It was about finding closure in a situation where there seemed to be none. As the trial unfolded, the focus shifted to the broader impact of the tragedy. Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, once a pillar of the Memphis community, faced its own reckoning. The leadership grappled with questions about their hiring practices and the responsibilities of spiritual leaders. The congregation, still reeling from the loss of their pastor, struggled to come to terms with the revelations about his personal life. For Tabitha, life after the tragedy was a journey of resilience. She had lost her husband, but she refused to let the tragedy define her. Friends and family rallied around her, offering support as she navigated her grief. The community, despite its own pain, came together to honor Broads' legacy while acknowledging the complex truths that had come to light. In the end, the tragedy of April 4, 2019 wasn't just a story about a pastor's death or a scorned lover's rage. It was a story about the fragility of human relationships, the devastating consequences of betrayal, and the enduring impact of choices made in moments of despair. As the courtroom doors closed and the headlines began to fade, the lessons of the case lingered. It was a stark reminder that love, when entangled with lies and unfulfilled promises, can become a force of destruction. And for those left behind, Tabitha, the congregation, and the community, the journey of healing would be long and fraught. But it was a journey they were determined to undertake together. And so, the story of Pastor Broads Perry, a man admired for his faith and guidance, ends in heartbreak, betrayal, and violence. It's a tale that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the human condition, the fragility of trust, the consuming nature of love, and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. For Tabitha Perry, the loss of her husband wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a public unraveling of a life she thought she knew. For the community of Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, it was a painful reminder that even those we look up to can harbor secrets that shatter the image we hold of them. And for Latoshia Daniels, it was the ultimate price of letting heartbreak and anger dictate her actions, a choice that would leave her behind bars, her career, and future destroyed. As the dust settles on this tragic story, we're left with questions that linger. Could this have been avoided? How much responsibility do we bear when our actions ripple into the lives of others? And how can we, as individuals and communities, learn from such a devastating event. At its core, this story is a cautionary tale about the choices we make and the emotions we let control us. It's a reminder that beneath the surface of every perfect facade lies the complexity of human imperfection. If stories like these captivate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for true crime stories 24/7. Here, we delve into the most compelling cases from around the world, uncovering the truths that lie beneath the headlines. Don't miss out. Join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts as we explore the dark corners of human nature, one case at a time. Thank you for watching, and until next time, be good and stay safe. Appreciate you for joining. God bless you.